of Sodor is surrounded by a beautiful blue sea. It has fields of green and sandy yellow beaches. There are rivers, streams, and lots of trees where the birds sing. There are windmills and a coal mine and docks where visitors to the island arrive. And the island also has lots and lots of railway lines, so much so that those railway lines upgraded into 4 different railway lines for what today's video is going to be about. And hey guys, welcome to today's Thomas video related. And in today, it's going to be, as when I made the poll, I made talk about of what you want to see next. And the winner was, of course, of wanting to talk about the top 20 episodes that I would recommend to you guys. And of course, this episode is very focused and very biased upon episodes to all generations, all demographics on this video, particularly for all ages. It doesn't matter if you're new to Thomas or you remember Thomas in the past, or if you want your kids to start getting introduced to Thomas or getting into trains sort of thing. Any way scenario possible. And considering we are still in Thomas's 80-year anniversary or 40 years of the show, which I will get into the format where, again, I will be taking multiple episodes from different seasons of the show and putting them into one big video. Not too big. This, of course, takes a little bit of inspiration from other iconic Thomas YouTubers like The Unlucky Tug, MTI Thomas, Thomas 1, Edward 2, Henry 3, and The Thomas Clinic. All in which come into one major episode where, now, most of them talk about mostly classic-like episodes, and only classic episodes. Some of them even talk a little bit about the CGI episodes, but I wanted to make it a little bit more balancing for this top 20, where in this video, you will get a balance of 5 episodes from the classic era, 5 episodes from the hit era, 5 episodes from the Nitrogen era, and 5 episodes from the Andrew Brenner era. And each of these will talk about why I think these episodes are definitely recommended to you guys and why I think they should be shown to everybody who wants to get introduced to Thomas in the first place. So please put on your seatbelts and get ready to climb aboard as we go on to the top 20 episodes that I would recommend. Number 20, Splish, Splash, Splosh. Now, this episode is kind of an interesting one, especially to the ones who probably own the Splish, Splash, Splosh DVD. Well, in this episode, there was a lot of cool things that happened, especially due to the merchandising marketing that we've done, especially to those who own the Splish, Splash, Splosh Emily Trackmaster toy, and which it was a very interesting design that they gave it. And outside from it, they even made a wooden railway set as well with a few stuff, and a little take-along set, and that was once a Target exclusive one with James in it. But anyways, how does the episode stand out on the top 20? Well, one thing's for certain. The generic episode always starts. It's a rainy day on Sodor, and Thomas and Rosie had just finished shunting trucks in the yard. And then after they finished their work, they decided to go outside and splash on some mud puddles. As simple as that. However, later over time, the Fat Controller, or Sir Topham Hatt, sends Thomas to go get a washdown and Rosie to collect Annie and Clarabelle to of course, collect Alicia Body later on, but around tea time. But anyways, as Thomas was about to go get his washdown, he plays a little game, which of course, this only results 3 times, as you know, the generic 3-strike formula that we all know usually. Anyway, he spots Charlie and then runs pretty fast and does the iconic Splish, Splash, Splosh slogan of the episode, and then does it again with Emily and James. But Emily and James specifically aren't happy with this because for Emily, she's carrying some flour for Alicia Body's cakes, and James with strawberries special also for Alicia Body's cakes. But then the third time happens, and this was pretty serious, where Sir Topham Hatt and Miss Body gets pretty soaked by the disgusting mud water that Thomas insanely decides to go over. And this only results into not just generic confusion and delay as usual, but it also cuts out Thomas's firebox entirely. And in return, Rosie comes in and tells him that he splish, splash, sploshed into trouble. And this only results in Rosie giving a bit of her cold to Thomas's firebox back to normal. And in order to return, Thomas redeems himself only a little bit by not going through the mud puddle that he was crossing by and promises to take action. And with that, he gets the cake at the bakery where Emily and James were at, and they make up for it. And so they all arrive at the place where Alicia Body will be hosting. And then Rosie comes in at the very end of the episode and tells them that there is another mud puddle to enjoy. But Thomas shows that he has enough playtime doing Splish, Splash, Splosh for once in a while. And there it is, very generic Thomas episode. And it's honestly an okay episode to recommend. I mean, sure, it follows the similar lazy writing, but it's a pretty good episode overall. It's not the worst thing, but it's at least a somewhat good episode alongside Snow Tracks from season 13, most of all. So I wouldn't say it's mostly otherwise. Number 19, James Works It Out. Now, this episode is probably a really good James episode. But this is also a good Hector episode, in which I'll give a little quick recap on Hector the Horrid. This won't count, though, so don't consider it as part of the list. Bill and Ben come with Hector the Horrid, in which Thomas, James, and Edwards know is the freight car, and then they find him to be scary, they find him to be fearful. Thomas usually is doing a bunch of shunting in the coal yard, and he's got most of the trucks filled with coal, except Hector. Now, Hector being as most generic as he is, he acts big, he acts scary, he acts pretty tough by just screaming, "Keep away!" And Thomas just fears away and continues to do his work. And then one of the yard managers tells him to go shunt him, and then he tries to find a way how to get him back. But then afterward, Rosie comes in just a few minutes, only forward and back, and then Hector comes in just to say the same thing again. And then Thomas gets sick of it and takes a step forward, and then jumps in pretty hard up to a siding until he crashes. But then Hector's true colors comes in when that he's shy, scared, and doesn't know what it's like to be filled with coal and shunted. But then Thomas decides to change his ways by showing him what it's like to be filled with coal and shunted, and Hector overcomes his fears of being shunted and filled with coal ever again. And Thomas managed to change Hector's character in this one generic episode. Now, how does James Works It Out works in this episode? Well, you could say Thomas, James, and Stanley are working as usual in the middle of the winter, and unlike where James puts Hector at the very bottom of the train, at the very back, Hector tells James that it's starting to snow and should let the yard manager know ahead of it. Now, James, of course, doesn't like to be told what to do by Hector itself, especially in front of generic other characters like Thomas, Stanley, Harold the Helicopter over time, and Edward afterwards. Now, usually James, of course, always goes his little rebellious ways, and at the very climax where they enter the snow slide, and it soon hits him in the back. It stabs him afterwards, and then he starts to get the realization that his rebellious acts take a toll on him. So he apologizes to Hector, and they make up for it, and they manage to go through the snow slide and arrive at Great Waterton over time. And then he realizes that he is also a friend to Hector as well. Just like how Thomas was a friend to Hector, James also redeemed his character and became a friend to Hector as well. This was only a secondary, really good Hector episode that really benefited well, especially for a troublesome truck that is somehow better than Scruffy, because Scruffy probably never got this same treatment as we used to. And Number 18, Don't Bother Victor. This is a really good episode, not only just of the main character being in charge episode, but it's way better also as a Peter Sam episode. It's way better than Thomas in Charge, or Gordon Takes Charge, or even the Green Controller, just so you know. And it's a really good Peter Sam episode as well, that it's at least better in any ways, better than the Magic Lamp or the Refreshing Ladies Tea Shop. Now, in terms of this episode, it's a very different approach. This is, of course, where Thomas and Peter Sam complement each other, and then Mr. Percival comes into the picture and tells them he's going to meet at Napper Station, and he tells them that Victor will come around in the afternoon for his hourly fix-up, and tells him not to bother, and tells Peter Sam that he's in charge of the day and to not bother Victor for little things, unless it's really important. Peter Sam, of course, takes demand of it, and then right away, Rheneas tells them that Sir Handel's rods are broken, and he can't move anywhere. So he goes to see this situation. I also like how funny Peter Sam looks when he's in charge, very serious, unlike the previous episodes. But it really gives out that fishbowl reference, but the episode came out before that episode. Anyway, he goes to see Sir Handel, and over time, he tries to figure a way to fix him without needing Victor at all. So he tries to give him some oil and put it in his tanks in order to move it, but it doesn't work. And then, of course, Rheneas goes in and tells him about Scarlowi's funnel being blocked, and he goes to see him there and tells him, again, to not bother Victor. And this, of course, results to them, Peter Sam thinking to put water in his funnel to see if it fixes the blockage in his engine so he can move. But it only results to his firebucks coming out anyway. But as he was about to go to the next engine, he accidentally breaks down out of nowhere. and he tries to get Rheneas to fetch Victor, but then because of Rheneas being generic and obvious, where he just knows the thing that Peter Sam is in charge, he eventually goes off anyway. But then over time, Peter Sam goes to the realization and realizes that he is in charge and he can make the decisions, judging by hit arrow wisdom Thomas, that what he said. And afterwards, he gets Rheneas again to go fetch Victor anyway. And then, of course, this is the weird one. How did Rheneas go from that side to the other end of the track? That is the only major dislike I only have with this episode, but it's still a pretty good episode. Anyway, Victor comes in during his weekly arrival afternoon and then gives Peter Sam some new coal and tells him why he never fetched him earlier. But then Peter Sam explains to him of what Mr. Percival told him, and then Victor replies with that it's his job to help other really useful engines in need. Then he goes and fixes Skarloey, then fixes her handle, and then everyone's happy, everyone's laughing. Very generic episode, but it's a really good Peter Sam episode and a really good character in charge episode. And what's funny is that the episode even mentioned Duncan a few times, but what's crazy is how Duncan never even appeared in this episode later on. But don't worry. Throughout the video, you'll see a future Duncan episode appear on this list. Just keep an eye out. Don't worry. Number 17, Thomas and the Treasure. Now, this is going to sound pretty controversial, but I would say this is a really good Thomas-related hit era episode. And the episode, of course, obviously objects with our characters starting at Brendam Docks, with, of course, Salty, James, and Emily also appearing. And Salty gives them a story about a secret pirate's treasure hidden in the island of Sodor, and he provides them with clues. Now, James and Emily don't believe in this silly story, as they say, but Thomas, however, is interested and wants to be the first engine to find the treasure, while carrying the Admiral to the museum. And so he goes on this little journey that discovers on where those hidden clues are, and over time he begins to see James and Emily go by and still not believing in Salty's story. He eventually finds the hidden puzzles he's been looking for throughout the episode until Harold the Herald and Sir Topham stop him from continuing his journey and probably accusing him of not being held responsible for while taking the Admiral there. And of course, Harold has to be another character that also has to join into the part of the silly story trope. But Thomas doesn't give up, and he enters into a secret tunnel that basically already gives him access to the other side where the museum is being held, and he manages to find the secret treasure element of the final clue. As soon as the Admiral opens the museum, he sees the skull and bones, and immediately, again, James and Emily don't believe Thomas's on Salty's story about the treasure. But eventually the Admiral gets in on with the treasure and finds it, and everyone is happy that the treasure has now been found, and Thomas is proud that he managed to be the first engine to achieve of finding the pirate's treasure, leading everybody wrong. And this is a great episode overall. This episode really does take its inspiration straight out of the Pirates of the Caribbean and One Piece in general, judging by its... And I'm sad and feel bad for this episode in general that some people dislike this episode because of how it is pretty generic in its 3-strike formula. But this episode overall is pretty great, and I honestly think you should watch it. It's pretty underrated and honestly deserves at least a little bit of praise, you know, especially if you're a fan of Pirates of the Caribbean or One Piece. Number 16, Springtime for Diesel. I mean, how can you not put this in the top 20? This is the best Diesel episode of all time, especially for Diesel, most importantly. As you know, the episode obviously starts with Diesel being his usual self, of being a jerk to most of his other Diesel characters, Paxton, Sydney, and then also Daisy, which plays a major part in this episode, as Diesel biffs Daisy so hard that her springs come out right away. This, of course, spreads like news as when Thomas comes in, and then we see Ryan come in with the breakdown train with Judy and Jerome carrying Daisy to the Diesel Works. This, of course, leads into where Den and Dart have to find a way how to fix Daisy before, and it might either lead to a life or death situation for Daisy of what's left for the franchise in her appearance. This, of course, spreads like wildfire as Mavis tells Harry and Bird about the situation of Daisy, and they're pretty shocked about this. Diesel, however, continues to ignore this, as of course falls into his 5 stages of grief stage, where he's fine with it, then he gets angry, and then starts a little bit of bargaining, and then sort of in this format. But then somewhere in the middle of the night in the Diesel Works, he secretly goes into the Diesel Works area where Daisy is being frisked and gives out a full-on apology, where it's valid and acceptable, at least, where hopefully Diesel could eventually change his ways as a character and finally be respected by other people. However, he does bash a little bit about why he's acted like this throughout the franchise, and they blame him most of the time, thinking he is the accuser of what he's been doing all this time throughout this franchise. But then, so the next morning, Daisy gets fixed by Dan and Dart, and they go to work. However, and to think that Diesel would accept Daisy's apology, Daisy does not take the apology right away. So Daisy immediately tells Diesel to officially wake up and change his ways right away if he wants to be a brand new character in development and really show the best for other key characters. And so, as his busy day's work, as he just got out from the quarry and he was about to shun Daisy again, so as you think he is about to do it again, thinking he learned from his previous mistake, but he actually doesn't. He learns his lesson and actually improves his character entirely. This is an episode truly talking about Diesel's character development entirely. It really shows the difference of what would Diesel look like as a brand new character and his form of character, that really he could become a friend and would show compassion and companionship to other engines. And it's a really good episode. It's so sad that we never get to see this after that. It's at least a better episode than Diesel's special delivery, from the Nitrogen era. But, one can dream. Number 15, Dirty Work. Now, this is another iconic, underrated, and controversial episode from the hit era as well, from season 11. But it just shows James coming back from the works from... Honestly, we don't know how did James got into an accident or what was his dismissal about. But we know he just came back from the works. And he goes into Titmit Sheds where Thomas, Percy, and Emily were. And over there, Mr. Topomat gives Thomas, Percy, and Emily some jobs to do as they're getting ready for the upcoming party at Caustic Castle. And within, Thomas has to carry work at the coal yard, Percy has to carry stones and quarry there, and Emily has to carry fish trucks. However, James, is getting polished and has to also be ready to be at the castle for the party. So, in terms of James's rebelliousness, he gets a wash and gets polished. And however, whenever Percy, Thomas, or Emily decide to go to talk to James for help, James basically just ignores them and continues to be rebellious and continue to not care about them, and proceeds to also be decorated with flags. However, when he gets to the castle, he's the only one there with Sir Topham Hatt, and he realizes the mistake he's made, and so, in order to make up to his friends who still haven't finished their jobs, he decides to help them out finally, after not helping them in the first time. So he first helps Thomas, then he helps Percy, and then he helps Emily get all their jobs done, only in return to get extremely filthy with coal, quarry dust, and fish, only to then also carry the mayor all the way to the castle, and thinking Sir Topham Hatt would be disappointed since he's filthy after helping his friends out. But Sir Topham Hatt doesn't. He smiles and gives the approval that he is a really useful engine and truly shows that he will put his work over his other friends in need as a form of sacrificing things that should be done within overtime. This is a really underrated episode from season 11, and I think you should give it a watch. It really showed the lesson of putting yourself first and others before you, or actually better yet, putting others first and yourself second. It really showed a bit of that Bible verse scripture inspiration, which I don't have yet, but you'll get the idea. Number 14, Dent and Dart. This is honestly a really good episode, based on 2 Diesel characters from the day of the Diesels where they first appeared, and it really goes well. It shows Mavis going and working at the quarry as usual, but then eventually gets struck by a bunch of coal quarry dust and breaks her engine and she breaks down. Thomas, of course, takes Mavis to the diesel works to be fixed, and where Den and Dart work. And then, however, there's a big situation. So Topham Hatt arrives and he assigns Den to work at the quarry as Mavis's replacement. But he can't because he also works with Dart, and which Dart also implies that they are a team. They work together. They're always partnering with each other. However, due to the division, they are meant to go separate ways and work differently, making their lives a little bit difficult without the other one in part of them. This really has a form of brotherly bond that Den and Dart have with each other. It really shows the connection that they have really 100%. And I like it because Den, while he works at the quarry with so many trucks everywhere, filled with rocks or just derailing everywhere, it's a complete mess. Dart, on the other hand, is a bit of a different stretch, as he tries to figure out how to fix Mavis, but he can't do it without Den. But thankfully, Toby and Henrietta also appear in the quarry as well, which also add a little bit. This is where Toby, Henrietta, and Mavis give Den and Dart a bit of advice and a bit of help, a bit of a mentor, to at least overcome the situation without the other one, that they can do it themselves at times whenever they're far away from each other. And it does pay off. Den manages to clean up the quarry and organize everything, and Dart manages to fix Mavis entirely. Only for then, Mavis returns to the quarry, and the quarry is 100% organized and clean. All the trucks have been put in order, and with that, he proceeds to go back to the diesel works, thanks to Toby and Henrietta's advice that helps them over time. And when both Den and Dart finally get back together and tell them their day's life right now, and they're just glad to be back together. I love this connection. This is a really good Thomas episode that really shows how these new characters can have their own personal story very well. It really has like a really dynamic between other iconic duo characters like Beavis and Butthead, or Marvin Harry, or SpongeBob Patrick, or even Edward and Henry. Look how they massacred my boys and all, and just go. Number 13, Mighty Mac. Now, this is another iconic new character-based episode where it only focuses on the main character, the new character specifically Mighty Mac, in which this is a really cool new dynamic character that's actually based off of a real train, and it really shows. Now, the episode, of course, obviously focuses on Mighty Mac's simple goal. Just get the vacationers to the campground. Pretty simple. It's a 100% quick job to do. But since they're new to the Sodor Railway, it's difficult from where they usually come from when it comes to getting the vacationers all the way to the train station. So they have a big complication of where things work. However, Hit Era Thomas provides some wisdom where look at the track where you want to go and follow the track that'll take you there. They take this advice, but this is where it keeps a reminder for later. So they try to figure out a way how to get to the passenger flatbed platform, but all they do is just go back and forth, go on the turntable, and remain back into the position they started in. And they're already late. So they already get packed up. They have the passengers over there taking them to the campground. But then every time they go into a fork, they always want to go this way, or the other one wants to go that way. This goes into like little twin arguments that has happened before, with Bill and Ben, Donald and Douglas, Ari and Bert, all sort of twin character relative stereotypes that Mighty Mac goes through when it comes to encountering a fork. Eventually, the final fork that they go to ends up being a dead end, and they're stranded. This, of course, leading to Mighty Mac blaming each other, fighting it over, only to push their carriage to a rock. And then after that causes a massive landslide, and it causes them to be stuck. While being stuck, the passengers of the campground who wanted to go on vacation ended up, I believe, they lifted the entire carriage coach and then live it all the way to the other side of the track, only for Mighty Mac to see if they could push the rocks out of the way and then get back on track. And then, out of the middle of nowhere, they somehow uses Thomas's advice when noticing the red-yellow flag all the way up that leads to the campground, and they follow it. And for some reason, they managed to make it all the way over there. This is a really good episode But it's so sad that they never got any more episodes after this, because there was so much ideas you could have done with such a unique character. But I guess they were only just made also for toys and marketing. I mean, there's a lot of different variations. They have the Trackmaster Tomy model. There's a wooden model. There's a take and play model. They have so much things. There's just so many things that they could have done with this. And for some reason, they also returned in season 12 with CGI faces, but somehow didn't return in the Nitrogen or Andrew Brenner era by any chance meaning. I don't understand. They're such really good characters, but I just wish they got more. Number 12, Spencer the Grand. Spencer the Grand is a really good Spencer episode in general. Outside from other iconic episodes, this also acts like an aftermath of Spencer's sort of villainous heroism that he had way back from Hero the Rails, the movie in particular. However, I will say this, throughout the episode, of course, the island of Sodor is surrounded by very massive fog that is just pretty thick to chug around. And for some reason, Spencer decides to go to the Duke and Duchess of the summer house at Boxford. But because the fog is so thick, he can't even see anything. So he tries going around the island of Sodor looking for it. But in return, he only goes through 3 different locations. To the quarry with Mavis, to Whit's waste dump, and back to Timot's sheds where he started in. That's how difficult fogs are in real life too, by the way. It's very difficult to see in such hard atmosphere where the lights are not even bright enough to even see your direction where you want to go. But the also major pointer is Percy, which he gets absolutely lost in the fog after his mail run, which gets him surrounded. This is where Spencer's act of heroism comes into place, where he is able to find Percy right away and bring him back to Tidmouth's sheds. And he does so perfectly, because he manages to find him and bring him back to Tidmouth's sheds. And Percy rewards him afterwards with the spot in Tidmouth's sheds for shelter, after his amazing, heroic act of bravery and showing determination of helping others. This is a really good episode after his villain arc from Hero the Rails. It really shows that aside from just being Gordon and Thomas and most of the Steam team's arrival, he is still has a generous, kind heart for other engines who could be really useful as well. Number 11, Squeak, Rattle, and Roll. This is another episode from the hit era, but it really shows a bit of that Railway series accuracy, kinda, almost. And the way it works is basically how this episode goes. Diesel, of course, obviously blocks Gordon's way and then gives him his old generic idea of Diesel's taking over Sodor and steam engines being scrapped.
Oh wow, I didn't hear you say that already in the Tender Engines episode of season 3? Like, you said that same line again for no reason. I don't know why you're saying it again.
But anyways, aside from it, as Gordon is puffing very fast with the express, he hears a bit of a squeaking in his pistons or his wheels, and then as time went on, he despises it and notices it. However, when he goes slow, he doesn't hear the squeak anymore, and he does that only until for the end of the day. Until Sir Topham Hatt comes at around evening and tells him to do something about bringing him and the children to the boat trip. However, this only adds a penalty to himself where he's about to go see the express and take the children there. There's a bit of a problem again with the squeaking issue. And as he's arriving to Knapford Station to pick up the kids and Sir Topham Hatt, he has 2 options. Either option A, he goes slowly only for the children to miss the boat, or B, go quickly and let Sir Topham Hatt hear his squeaking and rattling, which he notices. Now, he goes for the first option at first, but Sir Topham Hatt notices that he's fooling around and needs to hurry up. In which, again, Gordon's spirit feels a bit crushed from what Diesel said to him way back about being scrapped and because of the squeaking and rattling. However, Sir Topham Hatt manages to lift Gordon's spirit back up, that he is still the fastest train, and Gordon gets his spirit lifted up, and he manages to continue going fast, and he treats it like it's his last run in the railway service, until he doesn't care. He doesn't care about the squeaking, he doesn't care about the rattling, he doesn't even care about the upcoming new knocking noise that comes out of nowhere, and he pushes forward, all the way till he gets to Brendam Docks, with Diesel, the newfangled nuisance very in the background, aside from Henry and Salty. They arrive at the boat trip right on time, and Sir Topham Hatt is very proud of him. But he tells him this: "Have you ever went to the repair yard?" And with that, he goes to the repair yard, gets his wheels and his axles fixed, and the squeaking no longer exists anymore. This is honestly a very secret gem from the hit era. I mean, the Unlucky Tug mentioned it, but I guess it really showed a bit of demonstration of a bit of that Railway series accuracy, where back in the Railway series, Sir Topham Hatt would buy Pimp and Emma, where Gordon would be replaced in terms of the Express, in which, of course, Gordon would take the last Express run as all before retirement. And it's so great because it's crazy how Mattel abused it all the way when Forever and Ever comes into place, where they treat him like an absolute child. But in the Railway series, at least in Squeak, Rattle, and Roll, it does an amazing job with this. And it really shows Gordon's character really matured in this format, at least for the most part. A definitely recommended episode to watch from the hit era. So, you're still watching the video. Okay, that's good. You're still keeping up. And so here I'm going to go over some honorable mentions that I was originally going to put into the video, but immediately I got cut or just didn't want to put it in the video. So here are the following episodes that I was going to put in this video, but ended up getting cut. And they are Gordon Takes a Tumble, Better View for Gordon, Wrong Road, Down the Mine, Thomas Goes to Breakfast, Thomas Saves the Day, Thomas and Birdie's Great Race, Birdie's Chase, Old Iron, Edward's Exploit, One Good Turn, All at Sea, Percy, Thomas and the Dragon, Rock and Roll, Heroes, Thomas and the Jet Engine, Steamroller, Terrence the Tractor, Bulgy, and Special Funnel. Number 10, Over the Hill. This is another really good CGI episode based on the oldest characters in the show, Glenn and Steven, which of course, for Glenn mostly, we see more of his story after the events of The Adventure Begins, after Marion made the massive discovery of finding Glenn, and then Glenn gets the endorsement of working also with Steven and Millie at Alsted Castle, which of course leads to them, of course, the usual day as usual, between the three characters. The three engines take a usual stroll around Alsted Castle like usual, and everything goes fine as usual. Until Steven over here is having a bit of beef with Glenn over here, which, of course, he challenges Glenn to a full-on race. And during the race, it's pretty slow, and it's like a generic race like usual. But it's like they're going at a very slow pace, even though they want to be known as the fastest. But over time, when they get to Gordon's Hill, they leave both James and Gordon on hold. And they just forget about racing and talk to each other like senior citizens at a retirement home. And all the way till Knapford Station until they reach to the very end. Now, sure, Sir Topham Hatt somehow calls it due to confusion and delay, but Thomas arrives with Sir Robert Lorthy, thinking it was amazing. Though they lost them, Sir Robert has the power invested in him to now provide a traditional race between Glenn and Steven every single year. I think this is a really good episode, really showing that these two characters, exploring the characters from Alsted Castle for a big difference. I really like this episode really well. Definitely recommended, 10 out of 10. Number 9, Duncan Gets Spooked. This is, of course, a really iconic, very spooky episode of Thomas. Very dark, and everything about this episode relies on its soundtrack and the tone of the episode, 100%, as usual. Now, of course, the usual narrow gauge railway, as usual, excluding Sir Handel. We even get a bit of that area where, of course, Scarloey, Rheneas, Rusty, Duncan, and Peter Sam are, of course, doing their usual jobs, until Peter Sam's trucks begin to come loose and fall into a steep hill and fall into the ravine up the bridge. Only for then Sir Topham Hatt to notice about this, and then Duncan, being a complete jerk as he is, begins to tease Peter Sam about ghosts. And however, Rusty defends it, but again, Duncan doesn't believe it. However, Rusty decides to tell Duncan a ghost story revolving around the engine who never made it back the ravine bridge. And of course, it's usual. The engine usually goes across the bridge, the moon is out, and somehow the train loses control and falls into the ravine as it sinks, drowns, and dies. And legend says that you could still see the little engine trying to get home when the moon is out. And of course, this got Duncan not so scared at the start, but over time he starts to feel a little frightened about Rusty's story, especially when he comes back home. And then especially when he reaches the bridge and the moon is out again, he sees the ghost engine. Sorta, not considerate.
It's a bunch of dragonflies to actually form the shape of that engine, which behind the scenes, it actually is just a white version of Skarloey. And they decide to also, the driver and fireman decide to throw a rock as also a little ghostly trick, excluding Percy's ghostly trick, just so you know.
And then, of course, they tease him again, thinking that Duncan is scared, but Duncan shuts his eyes to prevent that he's sleeping. Although, he only opens when they aren't looking. So I figured this is a really good spooky episode. Outside from other episodes like Haunted Henry, Percy's Ghostly Trick, or even Tale of the Brave as a movie, and some other episodes that relate on the spooky aspect, this is a really good episode, especially when it works with the tone of how it works perfectly. Love this episode. Number 8, Diesel's Special Delivery. So remember when I said that I despised a bit of that episode? I lied. This is a really other good Diesel episode and it was only the other one in the Nitrogen era. Outside from Springtime for Diesel, this is a really good episode for Diesel. And of course, the schoolhouse in Sodor has its roof being destroyed and damaged, and Diesel is carrying some slate cars to fix it. However, this of course results to him going after some fame and attention.
Like most social media influencers, who want likes and attention.
And Diesel sees it with James having a cart of piglets, where he's being shouted and cheered and getting respect by everyone. And Diesel, of course, wanted this attention, but he can't because he is a Diesel. And he gets this influence before, and he also goes up to Thomas with this truck of apples, and Rosie with her flatbed of flowers. Now, of course, Diesel, on the other hand, he asks them nicely to take those cars, but it doesn't help in the aftermath. You could see how this character, Diesel, is so sympathetic on this one. And again, he still can't beat James and the piglets in that car. Still wants that fame, that fortune. So much so to the point where he gets really jealous. To the point where he just takes James's truck of piglets to the schoolhouse, not noticing that he still left his slate car in the middle of nowhere, wherever. This only causes the children to still be in the rain with the schoolhouse still not fixed. However, and this of course gives Diesel a bit of a more honoring and more worthy. Of course, Sir Topham Hatt's confusion and delays actually noticeable and more affirmative because Diesel is more accused of an act of stealing of trucks of piglets that James was holding. So, in order for redemption for Diesel, he decides to take back the truck of piglets back to James and apologizes to Farmer Trotter for taking in the first place. And then his only main goal and his main purpose is to just get the slate truck to the schoolhouse right away, as soon as possible. And he makes it. And in return, he finally gets the likes and attention that he finally gets in this episode, as the children cheer for Diesel and are glad that the schoolhouse will finally be fixed. He finally feels the like and attention. He feels pretty heartful. He feels the remorse. He feels something. And I like this episode that really shows his form of sympathy for getting that attention. Even though he's a Diesel, he can also get sympathy if he does his job correctly. Number 7, Tickled Pink. This is another interesting, underrated, or utilized James-related episode. And I think this is a really good episode that depicts James a bit perfectly, aside from other ones like James the Second Best. But, as usual,
James just comes back to the sheds, and Sir Topham Hatt assigned him to be given a new coat of paint
and shown at Bridget's birthday party, since Emily broken down. And of course, he proceeds to go to the Steamworks and get his brand new coat of paint of red. However, they couldn't find any new red paint, so they had to paint him pink. And of course, he is ready to go and collect the passengers for Bridget's birthday. Now, James never noticed this until he had pink color. This, of course, resulted in to him. He gets laughed by Emily, gets picked up by Gordon and Toby, which they pass by, gets laughed at by Diesel, and then proceeds to hide in Henry's tunnel for a little bit, only for them to just peek out in front of his friends of Thomas, Percy, and Gordon, and they all just purely laugh at him. Aside from all of the hiding, he doesn't notice that he's actually late for the job. So, in order to make up for his silly mistakes that he's been doing all around Sodor, he just proceeds to go to Maithwaite Station to just pick up Bridget and the girls to the birthday party, only to ignore all the laughing humor from Spencer and Henry along the way. When he gets there, he's not greeted with laughter, but instead with compliments. Bridget actually loves James's pink color, and it really doesn't make him shameful, but he actually feels complimented, and he receives this feedback really well, and he's happy for it. And then he finally arrives at the birthday party, and he's proud to at least wear his new coat of pink paint, even though in the next episode, he goes back to his red paint as usual. Number 6, Percy's Unlucky Day. This is a very different Percy episode from the other Percy-based episodes, you know? And it's pretty generic, and it's a little bit better than Panicky Percy, but this is where Percy still remains his full character without the form of paranoid stuff that Wubba did to him. So, anyway, it starts as usual, where most of the episode relied and starts with, of course, the Percy mistakes the sick man with the green napkin and proceeds to go only for his mail to still not be finished or unloaded. And of course, Thomas comes in and calls it bad luck alongside with Bill and Ben. Of course, in terms of Bill and Ben, they, for some reason, still have pumpkins falling off of their cars and their trucks at times. One here by the station and another one by the hills. In which, of course, this, of course, results into Percy getting his wheels all sticky from the pumpkins that fell on the track. And then, of course, again, Bill and Ben we'll get into a little bit later. And so, as Percy continues to go around his day and encounters Hero and tells about it. Now, Hero, of course, tells Percy that he's just having an unlucky day. And then proceeds to go to Austin Castle afterwards. Now, for Bill and Ben, they get restricted by Sir Topham Hatt after the stern to let him notice that in order to avoid any more pumpkins falling out of their cars, one of the twins has to go in the back. Now, of course, the twins, as usual, Bill and Ben, proceed to argue of who should be in the back. And, of course, Bill proceeds to go in the back afterwards. And, of course, Percy goes to see Stephen for a bit and tells him about the unluckiness he's been having, and then Stephen proceeds and a horseshoe for Percy. However, he proceeds to do well throughout the day without the horseshoe, without any form of luck. He was already blessed enough, and after all the proud achievements he did, Sir Topham Hatt gives them a gift to send to the Duchess of Boxford of a new hat. And then after that, Percy notices Ben derails and Bill's struggling to get him back on track. Now, of course, Percy's willing to help, but only to the result of not having the horseshoe at all. Percy almost feels a bit shamed and proceeds to go away, and Bill proceeds to try and get Ben back on the tracks, but it's close to resulting in both of them derailing, maybe by any chance. But Percy, without the lucky charm, proceeds to help them anyway, and Sir Topham Hatt praises Percy's act of bravery really well. And then proceeds to go back to Austin Castle, where Stephen was. And of course, Sir Topham has to deal with Bill and Ben's argument once again. After coming back to Austin Castle, Percy talks about the missing horseshoe that Stephen gave him. But Stephen responds with, after the dropping it, he only made it just to cheer him up. And it actually works. It really is a good Percy episode in general, where it's still fitting and it really works pretty well. Definitely a very recommended Percy-liked episode. Number 5, Old Reliable Edward. This is one of the best Edward episodes. Truly a follow-up to Edward the Really Useful Engine, where of course, Gordon, of course, obviously making fun of or mocking Edward for being old, reliable, and uses all that negativity stuff and all as usual. And then eventually Gordon gets stuck on Gordon's hill, but this time he mistakes a pair of pants for a warning flag, and it gets him stuck on the hill. And of course, as usual, Edward has to have his own branch line, his usual. Then he gets a call from one of the station masters to know that he's stuck on the hill. While Gordon's stuck on that hill, Emily and Thomas notice him getting stuck on the hill and make fun of him for it afterwards, only to notice about the pants being treated as like a warning flag for Gordon. And eventually, Edward comes in, and of course, Gordon again calls Edward old and reliable, gives him a push. But then, as soon as Gordon gets to the top of the hill, he just says his usual catchphrase of express coming through and doesn't give Edward a thank you. And then Edward tells it to Thomas, and then we get this fun little friendly friendship dynamic way back from the very old episodes of the show, where, of course, now this time Thomas and Edward plan to play a little trick on Gordon in order to teach Gordon a lesson specifically. And of course, they tell him the whole pants' warning flag at night afterwards. And then Thomas challenges Gordon to a little race to be ahead of him. But this is all part of the trick setup, where at the beginning, of course, Gordon agrees and then proceeds to give him a 5-minute head start. And of course, Thomas does do that 5-minute head start. And then, of course, he transitions into Gordon's line. But while doing that, Gordon is trolled by Thomas by Thomas giving Gordon the grin, noticing this is all part of the plan and it's all going to go over time. It's all going to go into place. And Annie and Clarabelle also take part of it, even though they take notice if it even works. But it does work. And it gets Gordon stuck on the hill once again. Then Edward shows up on the other side of the track of the hill and then tells back to Gordon about the same thing of what Thomas stated from what they said last night. And then Edward proceeds to chug away, leaving Gordon stranded on the hill forever and ever, until Gordon finally apologizes and gives Edward a thankful thank you, and instead is very grateful. And Edward accepts this apology, and the episode ends like so. It's a way better episode than Edward the Really Useful Angel, and it does way better. It's one of the best Edward episodes to watch 100% of the time. Definitely recommended. Number 4, The Flying Kipper. This is one of the best episodes from the first season of the show of all time, especially in terms of Henry, where he takes his usual job of taking the Flying Kipper at night. And we see it all come into place 100% perfectly, where, of course, he goes to the docks, picks up the long train of fish, and we get these massive, nice, beautiful screenshots and the nice Henry theme playing. And then, of course, we see less of the human characters, although the human characters see only a bit. And some even mention about the removal of the Coco scene. And then, of course, we get the most iconic Henry crash of all time. And then we get to see him go into crew. And then eventually, after that crash incident the next morning. And then, after when Henry comes back from crew, he gets a whole new shape. And he's a brand new engine again. He no longer does he have to rely on special coal, and he could finally use regular coal again. However, Hit Entertainment and Mattel decides to bring back the special coal, which I don't understand. But this is the best Henry episode overall, and the best one. He's one of the best Chad characters in Thomas, aside from Gordon. Number 3, Break Van, or Donald and Douglas. This is another really good episode. And especially it's coming from season 2, where we get to introduce to the Scottish twins, Donald and Douglas. And of course, we get introduced to where their numbers, Donald 9 and Douglas 10. Hey, that references a YouTuber I watch. But anyways, Donald usually has beef with the despiteful Break Van, who is being a bit of a jerk, and proceeds that he will behave better. And the Break Van behaves better afterwards. However, Donald proceeds to do something stupid by running into a station master signal box and get transport to probably get sell out by Sir Topham Hatt. But however, in terms of Douglas, James probably gets massive penalty and gets treated badly over when doing the train. And then, of course, Gordon, Henry, and Douglas are insulting him to the brim until he gets stuck on the hill, obviously. And Douglas continues to make note of him, and then with the spiteful brake fan. So Douglas decides to come in and help James on the hill, and then proceed to crush the spiteful brake van into pieces. Of course, this leads to Edward getting the breakdown crane to fix up the mess that he murdered, specifically. This massacre that I would say. However, Sir Topham Hatt tries to find a way how to negotiate between the two engines, if what he should do with the twins. And the mystery remains unknown, and it's just a great episode overall. It's definitely a 100% episode to watch from season 2. 100%. Number 2, Fish from season 4. This is one of the best season 4 episodes of Thomas that is definitely recommended here. Judging by how the atmosphere of the episode takes place 100% of the time, from the beginning of the episode where we get to see specific landmarks in the island of Sodor, from the seasides to the docks, to even the forest alongside. And it even shows the pure definition of how trains in the real world perfectly work connectively. As you can see from this picture right here, you can see James, Percy, and Duck facing this way, and Thomas is facing that way. It shows the true connection of how the trains in the real world connect well with Sodor. Notice to the fact that most of the trains effectively really go well. It shows how accurate we are from this connection of how Thomas connects with the real world elements. And as we go into the more specific episode, Thomas tells Duck about specific experience with fish from the episode Gone Fishing, for example, when he accidentally gets fish in his tank specifically, which causes his firebox and funnel to go a bit funny. And then tells it to Duck specifically, which Duck will take intel later, and which Duck is known for just to put the last final boxes on the back of Henry's train of the Flying Kipper. In which, of course, by looking at this picture, this shows how we get to see Henry chug along very slowly from carrying the Flying Kipper at a very good viewpoint of how real trains look. And just by this camera angle, it shows how Henry would look like if a person was standing right there. He'd be huge by then. As the rest of the episode continues, of course, Duck shows up at a random station to be the back engine as Henry's about to go Gordon's Hill while carrying the Flying Kipper. Now, as they're doing it, Duck notices two difficulties. One of them being that the tail lamp has fallen off and broken, and Henry noticing that his Flying Kipper is getting heavier as he climbs up the hill. Note to the factor that Duck results into crashing into the back of the train and be covered in fish. By the next morning, Sir Topham Hatt apologizes to Duck about the incident, that they should have checked the tailgate sooner and put it in properly. And Duck realizes the experience from what Thomas said about the fish. Now, before I get into the number 1 Thomas episode of all time, I want to go over 10 more honorable mentions that I forgot to mention in this video, but didn't make the cuts. And they are Toad Stands By, Percy Takes the Plunge, Double Teething Troubles, Busy Going Backwards, Henry and the Elephant, Stepney Gets Lost, Rusty and the Boulder, Toby and the Flood, Lady Hatt's Birthday Party, and Percy's Chocolate Crunch. And now, the best Thomas episode to recommend to you is none other than number 1, Escape. And here's why Escape is considered the best episode of season 3 specifically. As the episode starts off with Edward and Trevor communicating with each other like a normal conversation until Douglas comes in and scolds Edward for not even working. But however, Edward goes to where Douglas locates at the coaling plant and tells him his story of almost saving Trevor from scrap specifically, with the help of the vicar as well. Now, Douglas gets shocked at this, and of course, it helps him later on in the episode, as later on where Douglas goes to a part of the island of Sodor where there's only diesels. And again, part of the fish episode is even replicated here, where you can see Mavis, Boko, and Diesel show this way, and Douglas is, of course, facing that way. Truly big reference, of course, afterwards of where fish headed after this. Really good implication of how the real world of Thomas looks. Afterwards, as Douglas finishes up with the scrapyard, a voice talks to him, knowing if he's one of Sir Topham Hatt's engines. He notices. And of course, the voice ends up being Oliver, with of course his brake van Toad, which unfortunately they ran out of coal because they were actually escaping from scrap. Now, Douglas of course learns from Edward's story about saving Trevor from scrap, and Douglas decides to help Oliver escape the scrap yard as well. And otherwise, they head forward, and most of the episode is where, of course, the soundtrack kicks in. Similar to, like I said, with the Duncan episode previously and other ones. But as they're about to leave, they're stopped by the dog and foreman, in which Toad, of course, gets a headlamp as well, and they set off as well. After the foreman gives them an inspection, they head off back to Sodor, and the amazing soundtrack plays as they're escaping. Unfortunately, I can't play it because due to copyright restrictions, but they finally reached in the early morning. They park Oliver and Toad at a specific spot, and by the next day, the rest of the engines are being told by Douglas's story of saving Oliver, and Sir Topham Hatt comes in and talks about the addition of a new engine added to Duck's branch line, which of course Gordon and James mentioned about Douglas talking about to Sir Topham Hatt about his heroic action. And because of Sir Topham Hatt's agreement of them adding a new engine, Oliver officially gets rebranded, gets a brand new color and new designs, is fixed, and now is a part of Duck's branch line entirely. And the episode ends like that. As the recording of this video, the CGI Thomas YouTube channel decided to release a new character in CGI of Dustin, which of course gives the question if CGI is even returning, and because it even brings the question of where it's heading, especially because they just released it as well, which begs theories after the results of the Royal Engine, which already ended the entire show entirely from where Thomas and Sir Topham Hatt specifically ended, which begs bigger questions specifically, but it also ended the good character note for Beresford after Journey Beyond Sodor, only for them to just ruin his character in All Engines Go, which is sad. And it also plays the nice homage to the Lady Hatt's birthday party episode where Sir Topham Hatt becomes Thomas's fireman. And this even begs the question, where will Thomas go after the Royal Engine? Are we still gonna have Henry and Edward in the main cast again? Are we still gonna have Nia and Rebecca in the cast? Are the characters still gonna be out of their character format? Or is there even gonna see returning characters appear in the new season, whatever it is? Because I know during the interview they said for the new toys and new series, still no Marc Foster Thomas movie, by the way, but maybe there's a chance that the CGI will continue. We could see some characters from the model series hopefully get into CGI. I would really like to see any of these characters become into CGI, along with some bonus Railway series characters, since Mike, Rex, and Bert got added as well. And this even begs the question, are the episodes in terms of storytelling going to be worse like they did in the Hit and Nitrogen era, or are they going to be better in like the Andrew Brenner and classic era of the show? Only one can tell. But as said, I can guarantee that Escape is the best episode to recommend. And with that, that's all, folks. And thank you for watching for the rest of the video, in which, of course, this was a really interesting top 20 Thomas video I have ever done in a long time, since like the 80-year anniversary episode video I've done about it, and throughout 2025 it's pretty mixed in terms of how Mattel has gone throughout, in terms of the merchandising not exactly succeeding, and the idea of we eventually finally got the Down the Mine pilot episode finally on YouTube. But anyways, outside of it, hopefully, let's see if this video gets to around maybe 10 to 20 likes. If this video gets around like 10 or 20 likes, I could do more top 20 related videos. Like I could do top 20 classic Thomas episodes, or top 20 classic Hit era Thomas episodes, or top 20 Nitrogen era Thomas episodes, and maybe even top 20 Andrew Brenner era Thomas episodes. That could really be in case of like future videos if you like this video a lot, and want to see more. I could maybe even do a future Thomas movie ranking as well, from what I think, from what is the worst to the best Thomas movies of all time. And who knows, with the new series on the way, whatever it is, in terms of CGI returning, we'll probably get a brand new movie as well on the way, but who knows what. Outside from it, I might even do a video relating in terms of ranking all the characters, specifically around like the hit and Nitrogen Classic, and maybe even go on a full-on analysis video on the Marc Foster Thomas movie that somehow is going to be set to 2026, hopefully, if it's still in development or anything. I'll even go over maybe even the casting of who should be voicing the characters and who should be in this excellent masterpiece of a movie. I could see it happen. Outside from the Thomas content, there is other ones that I also am interested in doing, like, again, predicting videos, like recaps and something about series for both Cast One Pool and Terminal Montage. Again, with the Smash related video in terms of if we'll ever get a deluxe or Switch 2 edition, in terms of what should be in it and what shouldn't be or anything to make the content new. Alongside, again, discussing the situation between K-pop and Just Dance particularly, and ordered a way to solve it after the previous Fate of the Just Dance franchise video I made, alongside continuing on making the predictions for the Mario 40th anniversary video. And hello, this is Future Editing Josh, and I've come to make an announcement. I am finally making content for joshsmashlibrary.com, where please make sure you subscribe, hit the like. Also, it's also on TikTok as well, where this is where you're going to see access to 4-5 Smash clips a week, and of course, I'll give future clips and future guides and montages beyond, and then there'll also be future collaborations and future coaching sessions with other iconic Smash players and content creators as well. Just make sure to subscribe, and it's going to be interesting. Okay, I'm almost done. On with the outro. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like, have a comment, hit the notification bells, and subscribe. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Adios.